Welcome to a bonus episode of Critical Role Demystified. If you've been keeping up with this series, you know that in episode 36 of the Vox Machina campaign, the players showed a video summarizing the events of the campaign from the 2 years before they started streaming their game, complete with art by Wendy Sullivan Green, a Disney animator and one of the earliest Critical Role fan artists. So today we're going to go through this video and see what we can learn as game masters and as players. I'll also pepper in a few additional details that we know about the pre-stream game that aren't in this video, but that we've learned from interviews or other contexts. At least, everything I can remember. Obviously, this is going to be incomplete because none of us saw any of the gameplay for these sessions, and that makes this a very strange episode of this series to try to review several games that we didn't see. But I do think it's going to be interesting to see how the campaign evolved over time and how Matt introduced his players to Dungeons & Dragons and all of its tropes and lore. Also, if you're enjoying getting weekly Critical Role Demystified episodes, then this does not have to be an exception. We can take the series weekly once we reach 1,000 patrons. Everyone who even just joins at $1 a month helps get me closer to that goal. And if you, yes, you watching this, joined at just $1 a month, no joke, we would hit the goal overnight. So, something to consider. Link in the description. Now let's get into the video. The first session was run using 4th edition because Matt felt like it was the easiest system to use for a one-shot to quickly onboard players, particularly because character creation was relatively fast, at least I assume compared to Pathfinder 1st edition, which was the other very popular version of the game at the time. Now this is something that many people have discussed over the past 15 years, but D&D 4th edition does not line up with what a lot of people think of when they picture D&D, at least if they've been in the hobby for a long time. It's much more deliberately a heroic fantasy game, and for some people, that's not what they like. But Matt Mercer was running a one-shot for his friend's birthday, so heroic fantasy is actually exactly what he was looking for. And we can actually see this in the very nature of the first adventure he presented for his players.
They begin as a ragtag group of mercenaries in the swamp town of Stilben, eking out a living, when a job board posting brings them to Fendrel Voss, the wealthy head of a small merchant empire. Hired to investigate new competition in town called the Myriad, the path eventually leads them into a chamber housing a planar rift, pulling the group into the plane of the stillborn god Chrysathul.
Listen, I spend a lot of time thinking about the ideal escalation for a level 1 to 20 campaign. I really like the idea that you can start your adventuring career facing iconic low-level monsters like goblins and kobolds, quickly graduate to more formidable enemies like drow and ogres and orcs and gnolls, and then soon be on your way to more high-profile enemies like mind flayers, vampires, dragons, devils, and liches. And yes, if you've noticed, the order of escalation for a lot of these monsters is directly inspired by the encounters and story arcs of the Vox Machina campaign. And while they tend to face monsters at lower levels than most adventuring groups, thanks to their higher than average number of players and magic items, I still think we can look at the Vox Machina campaign overall as a really useful template for how you can slowly raise the stakes and introduce greater and greater threats to your party. But this approach also means that a lot of our low-level adventures tend to be really similar. A band of goblins or kobolds lurking in a small dungeon, maybe taking orders from an ogre or a baby dragon. If we really want to mix it up, maybe the enemies are undead instead of goblins. Now that is a grotesque oversimplification, obviously, but I do think that a lot of GMs who plan to deploy a long-running campaign will start with a relatively modest first adventure, usually against iconic low-level monsters such as goblins. And that's totally fine. I personally love that tradition. But Matt Mercer wasn't starting a campaign, he was running a one-shot. So he had them literally fight a god. Sure, it was an undead infant god, whatever that means, so clearly it didn't have god-like powers, at least not like we might think of it, but that's still a heck of a foe to face at such an early level, because Matt Mercer wasn't worried about power creep or the perception of what level 1 adventures should feel like. He just made an adventure he thought would be cool. His friends wanted to play D&D, so he just did the thing. He provided an awesome adventure that made them feel badass. But eventually the group decided to get together for another adventure to make this an ongoing campaign. So Matt switched them over to Pathfinder. And look, this is not the point of the video, but for years they would tell their friends that their hobby was playing D&D when they were actually playing Pathfinder. So here's a quick lesson. Most people don't care which specific system you're playing. They're just going to call it all D&D. So, pick the game you want to play, change the games however you want to change them, whatever. Outside of our tiny little corner of the internet, nobody knows the difference. So play whatever you want. Anyway, Travis couldn't make it to the second session, but this is where Ashley Johnson was recruited. So in-game, Grog disappeared, and they found his old friend, Pike, who lived in Westruun. She helped them track Grog down in a cave in Gatshadow, a mountain very close to Westruun. Now, this is where the Dark Horse comics pick up. They skipped over that first adventure with the undead baby god, but they did adapt this story, and they're retelling the subsequent quests as well. But we'll talk about the comics another time, so if you haven't read them and you don't know what happened to Grog, you might be surprised.
Deep within, they encountered an abandoned subterranean city, and eventually, a crypt housing a mind-controlled Grog, the reanimated corpse of his father Strongjaw, and a dying mage attempting a ritual to lichdom.
Yes, that's right. At level 2, they face off against a Lich. Now, big caveat here, this was not a Lich at full strength. This is a baby Lich. Not a demi-Lich, but maybe a semi-Lich? I obviously don't know what stat block Matt used, and it ultimately doesn't matter, but clearly, Matt just wanted his players to fight a Lich. Now, a Lich is less powerful than a god, so Matt is pulling down the scale of these quests, but this is still a powerful foe, and someone who would have a huge impact on the world if he gets his way, because Matt is still giving his players a heroic fantasy adventure. They also faced off against Grog and the reanimated corpse of Grog's father, Stonejaw Strongjaw. So this marks the first time one of the players' backstories is pulled into the adventure. This is kind of a strange example of it because it seems like Travis wasn't actually there for this fight, so he didn't really get the same catharsis of seeing his father's rotting corpse. But you know, the style for what this campaign would eventually become had not quite solidified yet. We'll get there. Anyway, the Lich's soul jar is embedded into Grog's chest, so the party goes on a new quest to try to cure him. This is also the first time they hear the rumor of missing children in town, something we'll hear about for a while before it gets paid off. Meanwhile, the party is hired by an elf named Dresvina, working on behalf of an unseen benefactor. He tasks our heroes to steal from an archmage, and they agree to do it, but they don't actually want to steal from the archmage, they just want to get his help to cure Grog. This is how they meet the wizard Eskel Rindarian. He can help them fix Grog if they bring him the skull of a nightmare and the heart of a nymph. Look, another quest. Do you see how Matt was daisy-chaining these quests together? Oh, Grog is missing. Gotta go fight a Lich. Okay, Lich is gone, but Grog needs to be cured and you need to find an archmage to cure him. And here, someone will hire you to steal from one. Gotta break into his tower. Okay, you got the archmage's help, but he needs ingredients. Gotta go fight a nightmare and get a nymph's heart. All the while, he's got another plot on the back burner with the children going missing in Westruun. It's really elegant adventure design. Oh, and they only have 2 weeks to cure Grog before the Lich returns to life, which is a fantastic ticking clock. The party fights a cultist to get his nightmare's skull, and this is where they find Percy in a jail cell. Then they go to a frozen forest called the Frostweald, fight some basilisks, and find a nymph, and Grog disappears with her into a portal and returns with her heart, graciously given by the nymph, who just likes Grog. And both Grog and Travis refuse to say what happened between him and the nymph for the rest of the campaign. They cure Grog, although he still has a nasty necrotic scar on his chest from the encounter. But Dresvina returns to them, and his boss is pissed that they broke the contract. The best way to make amends is to complete yet another contract. So this marks another adventure stemming from the fallout of one of their previous quests. They head into a dungeon and fight an iron golem, steal part of the golem, and return it to Dres to square their debt. Now, for the first time in a while, the party gets a fresh quest that did not come from the consequences of another adventure, at least not directly. However, it does seem like, thanks to their growing reputation, that's why they are approached to participate in an underground fighting ring. We know from other Q&As that they won their fight in part because they intimidated their foes via Scanlan summoning a donkey and Grog cutting its head off and soaking them in its blood. Then it's Christmas time in the real world, and so the party goes to the Winter's Crest Festival. But a huge ice crystal is delivered, and it bursts into a snowstorm that freezes the festival. The party is protected by a mystic merchant named Noja, although I think Vax was frozen, so my guess is that Liam couldn't make it to the game. A pale nude woman appears and jumps through a portal, and the heroes give chase into someplace that sounds an awful lot like an elemental realm of ice. The woman becomes a white dragon, and the party has their very first dragon fight. The narration in the video makes sure to describe the dragon as great, indicating it was probably pretty big, maybe an adult dragon. But we also learn that the dragon was weakened by its premature birth. Again, it seems like Matt wanted the party to fight a classic dragon, the kind they would recognize from movies and folklore, not a baby dragon, like a real one. But obviously he used weaker stats for the dragon because he didn't want to outright murder the party. And this is interesting. He makes sure they understand that this dragon is weaker than it should be, that they are normally at this size much more deadly. Probably because he wants to keep his options open and for them to fight more dragons in the future, and wants them to understand that the next time they fight one, they may not be able to beat it as easily as they beat this one, because while they're growing in level, the dragons they're going to be facing are also growing in level. That's just a really cool little detail. It's very, very smart. Anyway, they do slay the dragon. I believe Pike got the finishing blow, if I'm not mistaken. The party learns that the crystal was delivered by the Thieves Guild called the Clasp, which is the same organization Vax used to be a member of. I didn't think about it this way until I was writing the script, but this is Vax's backstory coming into play, with his history with the same Thieves Guild. Sure, we don't meet any characters from his past in the Clasp, but they still reflect his shady past back at him. The party heads to Amman, the capital city of Taldore, since that's also where the class's main headquarters is located. When they get to Amman, they hear more stories about kids disappearing. And now they learn that many of these missing kids were seen with a black-haired, golden-eyed boy just before they vanished. They do a few odd jobs in Amman and meet Sildor, Vex and Vax's father. Once again, the backstories of the characters are starting to become important. This is also the first time Vax and Vex have met Sildor's new wife and child. Sildor cannot get in to see Sovereign Uriel, the head of the Empire, and his contact on the council, Sir Fence, who we saw a version of in the cartoon, well, Sir Fence has disappeared. Sildor hires them to find Fence, and they eventually do. He's dead in his basement, and his home is full of demons. He also has notes about how an assassination attempt was recently made against Sovereign Uriel, and I'll let them describe what they found in his notes.
It seems that since the attempt, the royal family has grown strange and withdrawn, keeping Uriel from the council most hours, and his wife now demanding she attend all meetings, whispering in the sovereign's ear, and scoffing at the others who defy their decree. A General Krieg thwarted the attempt, and is mentioned often. The party decides to inquire with him.
Did you notice how gradually Matt got the party involved in politics? First, they came to a new town because of the last adventure. Then they met up with Vex and Vax's father and were sent to find a politician. They found him dead because he was getting too close to the truth, and they also learned about a strange corruption with the king and his family. So now they're willingly investigating, trying to figure out more details. They took the bait, which they did not have to do. And now they're willingly entering a political story. Of course, the trick to getting your players invested in a political D&D game is still to give them ways to go on other awesome D&D adventures, so they can still keep fighting monsters and stuff. So of course, immediately after reading these notes in Sir Fence's hand, half the party tumbles into a dungeon and fights an aboleth, and then they meet a hag named Trista, who trades Tiberius one of the magic items he was searching for in exchange for some of his luck, whatever that means. We'll definitely talk about hags another day, but making a deal for someone's luck is some hag bullshit, and I love it. But the reason not everyone in the party fell is apparently because some of them couldn't make it to that session. So Matt then ran a side adventure for Vax and Pike, where they got captured by the Clasp and had to earn their freedom by fighting a captured chimera. Of course, they didn't actually earn their freedom, and they just had to escape on their own and meet up with the rest of the party. The group forges papers to enter the Cloudtop district and meet with General Krieg, who seems willing to help but unable to make progress with Uriel. So since nobody else can talk to him, they decide to try. So now they are going to try to get an audience with Sovereign Uriel, the ruler of this entire empire. See? They're interested in politics now. It's just that easy. Of course, they can't just go in to see the Sovereign. That part is not that easy. Nobody's being allowed to see him. They meet Allura Vysoren, and despite her being a wizard and a member of the Taldore Council, even she can't get in to see the Sovereign. She helps them by casting a scrying spell with Keyleth, something I think Matt did because Keyleth didn't have the spell, or if she did, she didn't know Uriel well enough to cast it on him. Or maybe that's how scrying worked in Pathfinder. Two people could work together to share a scrying spell? I don't know. But either way, the party will now constantly try to combine scrying spells for the rest of the campaign, because the first time they cast it in the campaign, they did so in partnership with an NPC, and that seems to have broken the players' brains and made them unable to forget that this spell could be used with another spellcaster, even though that is not the case once they start streaming their game using 5e's rules. Anyway, they sense that Uriel's family is under demonic control, and he has become corrupted. The party confronts the Clasp and kills their troop leader, and finds 4 magic orbs on his body. Those will be important later. They all get back to Allura's tower, but she's gone, and the tower has been ransacked, with a hint that demons were involved here as well. This seems to be what happens when people get close to the truth. Demons happen. Then the tower's self-destruct feature activates, and they have to escape from a collapsing tower. This clip is one of the few we have from the pre-stream games. It's available on YouTube, and this is where the party accidentally stole their flying carpet from Allura. Then they go to meet with General Krieg, but his house is super weird, and there's a teleportation circle that takes them to a frozen cave and some distant mountains. The cave is full of gold, a hoard of gold, but that's not the only noteworthy feature in here.
Across the room are 4 obsidian orbs placed within the rock. One is touched, and a giant eye appears from within the black crystal. A voice erupts, calling for a brim scythe, and noticing the unfamiliar folk mentions, "Intruders, I know your face now. He is a fool, and so are you, insect." The orbs all crack simultaneously, becoming inert.
General Krieg appears and transforms into a blue dragon. A version of this encounter appears in the very early episodes of the animated series. Vax gets the killing blow on Krieg, and they flee before the cave collapses. Allura finds them and tells them that the evil manipulating Uriel is getting stronger, and as they speak, the clouds are actually growing dark. So you know what that means? It's boss fight time. They storm the throne room and fight some shadows who were possessing Uriel's family. And then a devil appears, and I'll let them describe this part.
A devil prince called Jurazel, who tells the party of a great war between devils and demons spilling over into this plane, threatening all creation. He justifies his actions and notes all the demonic forces throughout the city, and tells them of the horrible devastation that will ensue if the party stops him. They read him as honest, and Jurazel asks for their aid in destroying the demonic threat, offering a single wish should they make a pact. The party deliberates and agrees to the contract. Thinking over what they had just agreed to, the party returns to the throne room, asking for their wish to be provided to aid them in their demon hunting. Upon its casting, the party wishes to cancel their contract with the creature and attack. The Devil Prince angrily reveals his true form, a hideous treachery demon, a Glabrezu.
I really love that twist. Because honestly, if you're not doing cool, intricate, and believable lies and deceptions with devils and demons, as well as contracts and deals, then I think you're leaving a lot of awesome potential on the table. We also know from later conversations that they had to phrase their wish really carefully to make sure they got what they wanted and nullified the contract. Anyway, this fight is infamous because the Glabrezu is the foe who kills Pike. The party kills the Glabrezu and rushes Pike to a temple and resurrects her. This was the first character death and first resurrection in the campaign, and had the entire party in tears. They also had to work together to perform the resurrection because even though in D&D and Pathfinder you can just resurrect someone with the right spell and right resources, Matt adds extra steps to introduce tension and the chance of failure. We'll talk more about those in upcoming videos. You know, assuming any main characters die in Critical Role, which I don't want to spoil, but yeah, maybe once or twice. The party uses the stones they stole from the clasp to return the souls of Uriel's family members to their bodies. Uriel makes them members of the Taldoric Council and starts building a keep for them. It's worth noting that at this point, the party's name wasn't as we know it now, it was the Super High Intensity Team, aka the Shits. As they're about to be publicly celebrated by the Emperor, they decide to change the name, since Keyleth, Percy, and Tiberius have noble families that wouldn't look well on them with that name. That's when they land on Vox Machina, which means voice machine. That's a reference to their real-world careers as voice actors. Given that they have a recording of Matt pitching the cast on streaming the show, it seems like at the time their group name was still the Shits, and they changed it specifically because they were going to start streaming their games soon, and they probably should not be called the Shits. Uriel hosts a new Winter's Crest festival. Even though it seems like in the timeline of the game, I don't think it was actually Winter's Crest yet, he holds this festival to make up for the ones ruined by his demonic possession. Because, you know, it was Christmas in the real world, and they wanted to celebrate it again in-game, and so Matt justified it in the story. At the festival, they notice Uriel's son speaking with a boy with black hair and golden eyes. And now the oldest unresolved plot point finally gets paid off. The boy takes Uriel's son through a portal, and Vox Machina follows them to a floating island in the astral plane, where a bunch of kidnapped children are working in a mansion.
The Dread Emperor, as he calls himself, stands from his chair, the child illusion fading into a golden armored man with long black hair, 4 children chained at the neck to his breastplate. He attacks the party with fierce magic, mind-controlling all of his child servants to attack as well. With the first blow dealt, they realize that damaging him also hurts the chained children, one boy accidentally falling in battle to Keyleth's magic.
Here's something cool. The Dread Emperor is originally from the 3rd edition D&D supplement, The Book of Vile Darkness, apparently. But the first rumors about him were planted in one of the group's earliest Pathfinder games, and they fought him in one of their last Pathfinder games. Because once again, it kind of doesn't matter what game you're playing. You can steal any lore from anything and make it work for your campaign. We're going to talk about this kind of thing a lot more next year as I start really diving into other game systems in more detail, but there's nothing stopping you from putting D&D lore in your Shadowdark games or including Pathfinder lore in your Fantasy Age games. I know that probably seems obvious to a lot of you, but I know that there are some people out there who get reluctant to cross the streams, taking lore from one game and putting it into another because you're not using the game correctly, I guess? I say it that way, but honestly, this is a sentiment I often have to fight within myself. And when I say that I think that might be where it comes from, that's because I don't truly understand why I have such a resistance to that idea sometimes. I think that's where it comes from, but I'm not sure. But I suspect I'm not the only one who feels this way. And sure, some game concepts are specifically crafted to fit certain worlds or systems, and they might not all be the easiest things in the world to adapt. And yeah, 3rd edition D&D and 1st edition Pathfinder are more similar than they are different, so adapting the Dread Emperor was probably a very easy change and maybe a natural extension of the game. But I honestly think this is one of the most important lessons in this video. Your games are your own. Do what you want. If you think something from another game is cool, whether it's a villain or a world or even just a rule, steal it and never look back. At this point, the keep is constructed over 6 months and all the heroes go off on their own to do their own thing. This is a way to help explain some of the changes to these characters as they switch systems. They came back 6 months later for one game in 5th edition before the stream, and in this game, the party auditions some guards and hires their staff for Greyskull Keep. And then Allura approaches them and recruits them to find her missing friend, Lady Kima of Vord. As you might recall, this is the first quest we saw in the campaign, so we're all caught up. Actually, I just remembered something that is not in the video, and it's not even in my script, but on the way to Craghammer, we know that they encountered a couple of Goliaths from Grog's tribe. Specifically, Zanror, Grog's cousin, was a member of that group of Goliaths. And I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe Grog talked down the situation rather than initiating some sort of fight. He made sure that they left on somewhat amicable terms. That's just a little detail that I'd completely forgotten about until literally right as I'm recording this moment. Anyway, as we look back on these first 2 years of adventures, we can see a shift in storytelling and in how Matt created his adventures. For the first game, since it was just a one-shot played in 4th edition, they all basically took on the roles of epic heroes. But as they continued to play, Matt gradually transitioned them into a different tradition, where they are more like lower-level heroes who gradually take on bigger and bigger threats. Now, by no means am I implying that the shits didn't fear death as they gained levels and their enemies became less traditionally intense monsters like cultists and umberhulks instead of literal liches and demigods, because that's absolutely not the case. The stakes were still high for every battle, because Matt made sure his challenges were the appropriate difficulty to offer a really intense fight, but while also making sure not to kill his players' characters. Now, not everybody subscribes to that approach to adventure fantasy RPGs. Some people like to run games where there are high-level threats that the party could conceivably encounter when they're too low level to actually fight them and win. And the challenge for players is how they get out of those situations. But that has not been Matt's style, certainly not for the Vox Machina campaign thus far. This isn't a sandbox, it's a linear adventure. And when you're putting enemies directly in front of the players, rather than seeding them around the map and seeing where the players go, then yeah, it makes sense to curate the experience so that your players can conceivably defeat anything they come across, even if it might be tough. After all, the last thing Matt would want to do is put foes in front of his players that they couldn't possibly defeat. Right? Thank you so much for watching. This is a really fun video to make, and I hope you enjoyed it as well. We'll be back next week with the next episode of Critical Role Demystified, as we tackle episode 37 of the Vox Machina campaign, A Musician's Nostalgia. In this episode, some plot points from these pre-stream games begin to resurface, and we also hit a milestone. This episode features the most boring fight scene in Critical Role history, but we'll talk about that next week. In the meantime, make sure to like and subscribe, and don't forget to ring the bell. As a reminder, if you've enjoyed getting a weekly Critical Role Demystified installments instead of bi-weekly, come support me on Patreon. When we reach 1,000 patrons, we'll make that goal a reality. Join my Discord server to hang out with other awesome people who are catching up with Vox Machina and Critical Role, and follow me on Twitch to catch my live streams. We're filming videos that will appear on this channel, and we're also playing Hades. It's a ton of fun. And make sure to sign up for my newsletter to stay up to date with my latest updates. All those links are in the doobly-doo below. Since the cast of Critical Role played most of these pre-stream games in Pathfinder, I would love for you to check out my Pathfinder videos right here as I start checking out that system for myself. Until next time, play fair and have fun.